Why did you decide to write this book?
That's another sort of long story, but I wrote the book at a time where actually, I mean, our generation grew up at a time where architecture was completely, I would say, detached from the general public and the needs of that public. I mean, we were sort of into deconstruction and basically following our own ideology, and anything that was published.
What period are you talking about? The
80s. 80s. Yeah, 80s, which was the height of decon and figures like Peter Eisenman, Bernard Tschumi. So sort of a very ideological period that was essentially completely removed from the taste of the public. So on the other side, you had these sort of big commercial firms that would construct architecture just purely for the developer, that have no architectural value. You know? So on the one hand, you have these sort of avant-garde architects that would indulge themselves in, I don't know, drawings or models, kind of constructions that they made for themselves. And on the other side, you have very successful commercial firms, but that produced horrible architecture. And so my idea was, how can you bring these two sides in a way together? And by looking at product design, it was sort of interesting that that schism never existed in product design, i.e. that sort of separation from a vision from the user's desire, you know, but rather, you know, products always take the kind of user's need and then create a vision out of that. You know? For example, the iPod. Right, so it's in a way not answering the user's need in a mindless way, but carry that forth with a vision. And that's why people then buy it. And that's also why nobody was excited about architecture, because that dimension, that emotional dimension was missing for most people.
Was there a specific theory that you wanted to express in writing when you started?
Break through that schism between, let's say, commercialism on the one side and then the sort of cultural object on the other side, or highbrow and lowbrow, whatever you might call that. It was really about the power that architecture can have on people and places, and I felt that was really not exploited at that time at all, right? By removing yourself from the public, I mean, what do you gain? Sort of, right? I wanted to make, I was interested in this idea that architecture can actually be a sort of powerful catalyst, and in that sense, of course, also tap into commercialism, if you will, as a product. Yeah. And so architecture as a brand then becomes really a catalyst to raise the value of, it could be a place, a city, right, or a person, just like wearing a Prada suit elevates your status in the eye of others. So architecture in a way has that same power as was first proven in a way by the Guggenheim, which basically resurrected a city which was in industrial decline and made it a powerful magnet for investment, tourism, and so on, and spurred an entire redevelopment. And that is the sort of power of architecture as a brand.
A lot of people like something bad. Would have a negative connotation, but I think the book is also a little bit there to dispel that notion of branding as being something negative. Or I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. But.
Yeah, again, since I'm a sort of non-judgmental person, you know. So what I said earlier, I mean, money is neither good or bad; it's power, and branding is also power. So it depends sort of how and to what goal do you use that power. But I think it would be stupid not to use it. But again, it depends how you use it and what do you strengthen. If you strengthen the identity of a specific place, and that's something that we are trying to do in our own work, branding from the inside out, which is something that the book discusses. But again, it depends how you look at it. I mean, branding or architecture as a brand in New York was specifically employed, I would say, from 2000 to 2010 because of hedge fund brokers and people that made so much money that in fact the city had a shortage of luxury apartments, right? And hence these people could not be satisfied with just a clean tower. And that's then where the developers realized that branding could be of use to them, right? Started with the Richard Meier Towers on the west side, which were built in 2005, that were $2,000 per square foot of raw space. Yeah. And so obviously that addresses a certain clientele, and that also tells you how much architecture or design, let's say, is linked with money. So suddenly you had a clientele that demanded that higher standard, or a restaurant by von Gerichten or other sort of luxury amenities. So is that good, is it bad? I don't know. You know, it just tells you sort of where New York is, and sort of for me it's interesting that there's a shortage of luxury apartments that cost sort of $4 million or more. I mean, to me this is unbelievable, right? So it's a phenomenon.
So you also work as an architect. How were you able to employ your findings in your actual practice?
And it's that whole idea to combine architecture and branding, and what that really entails is that on the one hand you work with the developer on the strategic side. It's really all the strategic work that you influence, and along with that you know, you can have more influence on the design, but with the end user in mind, the financial aspects in mind, and also what you want to bring to a place. Right? So it's not design only, but rather the effect that that design produces in terms of profit, in terms of added value for the public, and in terms of its contribution to, let's say, a city where the city also benefits from that design in a way.
Could you name some specific examples? I know you've worked extensively here in New York, and now you also started work in China. Can you name some specific examples that you're particularly happy with of your own work? Or?
Yeah, I mean the last few projects we did were actually in the Middle East. So the last project we worked on is in Salalah, Oman, which is a very beautiful site near the ocean, and it's actually a joint venture between the government and a private developer, and the government has a site which is occupied by a large wetland. And so the idea was to do a resort for ecotourism, combine that with a sustainable residential community, and an eco-park where the whole development would become a sort of synergistic destination, both for local visitors, an educational experience for school children, families, and so on, as well as for tourists that go there from Europe and the other Arab countries, and to make it a very sustainable destination. Sustainability, again, as a sort of more holistic concept that goes from social sustainability, cultural sustainability, in a sense that respects the local heritage and so on, local materials, activates local labor, and then of course the environmental sustainability. So for that project we got the environmental award last year, which made the developer very happy and hopefully helps us to get the government approvals.